Welcome back to Inside City Hall. The city's public housing authority is getting some new permanent leadership. Mayor Adams today announced that we are going to have a new CEO after the previous CEO and chair, Greg Russ, resigned following his highly criticized handling of an arsenic scare at an East Village complex. Ever since then, the authority's former general counsel, Bova-Hiatt, stepped in to serve as interim CEO. She is now going to hold that position on a permanent basis. Meanwhile, Jamie Rubin, the former state housing commissioner, has been tapped to take over as chair of the NYCHA board. Both Bova-Hiatt and Jamie Rubin join me now to talk about their new roles and the future of NYCHA. Thank you both for being here, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And condolences. It's a very tough job. No, I mean, in all seriousness, we often talk about the $40+ billion deficit that the agency has to deal with, and you're brought in understanding that. I guess that's job one. Is that a fair thing to say, that you've got to sort of deal with that underlying fiscal problem?
Money is job one for sure. Yeah. I mean, I haven't been here long. Obviously, I just got in today, but even I know that money is job one. It's always going to be job one for NYCHA.
Yeah, and the new structure, this Preservation Housing Trust, of which you will be chair of the board, is intended to unlock streams of federal dollars. Is that the general idea?
Yes, but I will actually be the chair of the Preservation Trust.
Got it.
Yes,
got it.
Jamie will be the chair of the NYCHA board.
Okay, very good.
So, but yes, the trust will be one of the many tools that we have in our toolbox to really reimagine what public housing looks like in New York City.
So let me make sure I understand the correct split between your duties, because they did used to be, they were separate before, and then they were combined, and now they're being re-separated. You, as chair of the board, will deal with what kinds of issues?
So it's the chair of the board, to step back. I ran HCR, which is the state housing agency.
Right.
We had a similar setup. We had a housing finance agency. We had an independent board, independent chair. It was Bill Thompson at the time, who was a friend of all of ours. NYCHA is actually sort of an odd agency in that it didn't have a set situation like that. In the 2022, the state finally dealt with it, so now you've got a really independent board with an independent chair whose job it is to do what chairs of boards in public and private settings do: provide a lot of oversight, approve basic fundamental pieces of the agency's operations, like the budget, obviously the annual budget, certain larger size contract, exactly. And then the added piece, really, because of my background and the background of others on the board, to help Lisa and her team, who are terrific, with larger strategic issues, bringing outside help when they need it. Things like that.
And working through some of the new structures, some of the choices that residents in different developments are making about the residential assistance program, the RAD program, the demolition that's been announced right across the street here, the Fulton houses and Chelsea Elliott up the street. I assume that's going to be keeping you pretty busy.
Well, NYCHA, every day is an interesting day at NYCHA, and under our transformation plan, we understood that good governance would be bifurcating the roles of the CEO and the chair, and that's what we did last June, and we separated the roles, and I couldn't be happier to be working with Jamie. We've worked together previously, and his housing experience will be a great opportunity, a great sounding board for me as the CEO.
And you're chairing the Preservation Trust Board. Are you also a member of the larger NYCHA board?
No, I'm not.
Not even ex officio.
I'm not.
Okay, so they have clearly split the roles altogether. Okay.
Exactly.
So let's talk about this this new approach, which I understand is going to end up rolling through a lot of the different developments. That the cost structure across the street, it was determined that it would cost more to continuously repair an aging development than to simply demolish part of it and rebuild from scratch. I've also seen numbers suggesting that that's going to be the case at most and nearly all developments over the next few years. Is that pretty much your understanding as well?
It's really hard to say. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. When you look at all of our developments across the 5 boroughs, everyone is different. Some are smaller, some are really the size of a very small city. So I think we have to look at each development and see what path is the best path for them. A lot of our residents are leaning towards staying Section 9. Some of our residents are super excited about the trust, and as we've seen seen, a lot of our residents are excited about what would happen if their developments turned through PACT, whether that's a comprehensive modernization or a rebuilding. So I think when we look at the future of NYCHA, we're not going to see one path, but with consistent resident engagement, involving our TA leaders, working with our board, we're really going to see something reimagined.
And will it end up being, could we expect to see sort of, almost development by development, or, half a borough going in one direction, half a borough going in a different direction?
My understanding of it is it really is going to be a question largely of tenant engagement. So you've got different tenant, I assume every borough, and within every borough, different tenant groups have different views. They also have different life experiences in the buildings they live now. Some of them are in different condition. The only thing that's uniform, I assume, across all of them is no new building has been built since
a really long time. Exactly.
And so we're sort of out of time to deal with this in general. And, I spent all day with Lisa and her team today, starting to talk to them about their issues that they deal with every day. And this is an incredibly, besides the fact that Lisa's great, and her team is smart, they're very execution-oriented, and they're working with a real sense of urgency, as is the mayor.
You mentioned Section 9, which for our viewers is unlike Section 8, which are vouchers that a lot of our viewers are familiar with. Section 9 is basically the grants that come from Washington.
Exactly,
to
the
preserve.
Traditional. And one of the reasons why that we've really looked to both PACT and now the Preservation Trust is because the subsidy that we receive under Section 8 is almost double. So we need to be creative, we need to be strategic, and that's what Jamie and I are going to do.
And what are the marching orders from the mayor? What's he saying he wants as a sort of a final outcome here?
I think it's pretty clear. He wants this to be done. He wants the system to be restored to a state of of good repair, in effect, as urgently and quickly as possible. Understanding that the biggest issue, of course, is money. There's the P&A, the physical needs assessment that gets done periodically. That, as you said, was a $40 billion deficit. There's an operating deficit that results from some of the sort of day-to-day issues and the rent collection issues. So those are the problems. But there is no time to think up. We don't need more thinking about what the solutions are. There just needs to be action. There's a transformation plan. There's the trust that you yourself have written about. There's the very successful Red PACT program. And so we know what we need to do. We need to be talking to the tenants, which Lisa and her team do, and then we just need to get it done.
You know from your experience in the state that there are a lot of people who we might not necessarily think of as invested or as stakeholders who need to be convinced that you've kind of got it together, that this is going to work, right? I'm talking about corporate leaders, university leaders, the voters themselves at large, whether they're in New York City or not. How do you make that case? How do you plan to make that case?
From my perspective, whatever I can do to be helpful is going to be, I will absolutely do. Lisa is a great leader and a dynamic person, as you probably know. And I am not so dynamic, but I'm happy to, I'm happy to try to live up to what she can do. I do have a network of people, and because I've spent 35 years living and working in the city, mostly in the private sector, of people who I know from different places who, as you say, don't have the same level of awareness of what NYCHA is, what it does, what it means to the 350,000 people who live there every day, and I think would be happy to help. These people want to make New York City a better place. They just need to be brought into the conversation and asked to help.
Right.
And I'm more than willing to do it, and I'm capable of doing it.
An issue I asked you about last time that I assume hasn't changed very much since then is the rent arrears that have really stacked up during the pandemic and are still kind of sitting out there. I think the number was close to $500 million when we talked last time.
Yes, and actually it rose to slightly over $500 million, but we were very fortunate and are super thankful to our state partners. They provided us about $165 million to deal with those rent arrears. At the moment, we're working with OTDA to operationalize getting that money to our tenants. And I really believe that once we see that money come through, once we also connect our residents to other services like one-shots, people will get back into the cadence of paying rent. And rent, as you know, is a third of our operating budget. So having that money come in, having people feel hopeful again, that they don't have such a huge amount of arrears. As we talked about, our average income for a household is $25,000, and the average amount of rent arrears was just over $7,000.
Right,
An
right.
insurmountable amount of money to owe.
Right. And I guess in our last minute, just to make clear to people, and I understand the politics of NYCHA, there are always people who are going to complain or suspect or think that there's some kind of trick being played on them, but the basics haven't changed and are not going to change, right? It's about 30% of your adjusted income.
Nothing is changing.
Your family rights, your successor
Yes.
rights, nothing
is
has
changing.
changed. And it will all be publicly owned, no matter what acronyms are floating around. It will
Exactly.
be owned by the city of New York.
Exactly.
Always and forever.
Always and forever.
NYCHA, yes, exactly.
Yes, New York City Housing. Okay. Thanks very much for coming by. Best of luck to you. Stay in touch.
Carol,
Let us
thank
know
you.
what's happening.